Go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. PFAC, the part-time faculty union representing hundreds of members at Columbia College Chicago, is in a do-or-die collective bargaining struggle. PFAC has filed an unfair labor practices charge against the college. PFAC Communications Director Rosalind Cummings-Yates.
We are in a battle to retain our rights as part-time faculty, to retain respect and our voices, which have pretty much been ignored over the last year.
Cummings-Yates says that Columbia College Chicago is bargaining with PFAC, but not truly in good faith.
There are active sessions. Good faith. Well, there's a lot of stalling and a lot of back and forth. I can't come out and say that it's been totally in bad faith, but I wouldn't call it good faith. They are trying to decimate the union. They do not want a union. They do not want to have to guarantee a certain amount of pay. They do not want to have to guarantee a certain assignment of classes.
Cummings-Yates says here is what PFAC is fighting for at Columbia College Chicago.
We are fighting for quality education. We are fighting for fair wages and respect for part-time faculty. We are fighting for the rights of students to be able to have a real education that's not centered around profits and corporatization and academic freedom. That's what we're fighting for.
U.S., Mexican, and Canadian civil society groups, including labor, are delivering hundreds of thousands of ISDS out of NAFTA petitions. The AFL-CIO, Teamsters, CWA, Machinists Union, UE, Good Jobs Nation, and Our Revolution are among the groups demanding ISDS be taken out of NAFTA. Some members of Congress and other civil society groups want it eliminated too. They say ISDS gives immense power to corporations that hurt workers. The groups say that ISDS makes it less risky and expensive for corporations to outsource jobs and empowers them to attack domestic policies that protect public health and the environment by going before tribunals of 3 corporate lawyers who can order unlimited compensation be paid to the corporations by taxpayers. ISDS stands for Investor-State Dispute Settlement. WIN is America's multimedia news voice for workers. Support WIN's worker news mission at workersindependentnews.com. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Start off right with the Trumpster victory. Victory he is claiming on the kneeling. Woke up this morning with the Twitter and claiming victory. He won. Going to make them stand. It's not quite what the NFL said, but hey, you take victory where you can, right? Also, we know tomorrow the president is planning on signing a horrible executive order. We'll get to that. Today in Harrisburg, he's going to be at the airport. Tried to get tickets. Worked diligently yesterday to secure a place in the hangar to see the big Trump rally. Nothing. Turns out in Trump's America, you have to be a loyalist to be able to get in the door. An absolute pledged loyalist. Evidently, the party was handed a handful of tickets that they gave out to their state representatives and the Chamber of Commerce, and only the most verified loyal of Republican would be allowed. And again, this is the world that we're moving towards. This is how Trump will dictate. Not surprising. But he's here to sell his tax scheme. So we'll talk about that. But I wanted to get to the healthcare thing because, evidently the big executive order is going to do a couple of things. First, it's going to open up these associations so more, I guess, other people can buy into these association plans. And I would argue solely for the purpose of destabilizing the Affordable Care Act. But also what is being reported is that people are going to be able to buy insurance across state lines. And we know what this looks like. I mean, my problem with this is, it sounds great. Oh, there's going to be competition. No, there's no competition. What there's going to be is a race to the bottom. You're going to be able to buy insurance from Alabama, and it's going to be dirt cheap. Granted, it's not going to cover anything, but it's going to be really cheap. It's going to be really affordable. Until you look at the fact that, you're going to probably look at, $25,000 deductibles, or just not pay anything at all. Just get a nice card. But again, this is part of the scheme. It's not about good policy. It's about being able to say, hey, we've done what we said. We've destroyed that Obamacare, and this will do it. Most experts are saying, look, you have these cheap, barely regulated plans. It's going to flood the market with people who are going to say, look, I don't need it. Until you actually need it, but I don't need it. I'll pay the $50 or $100 a month, and I'll have insurance because then I can say I have it, but it's not going to cover anything. And then what it's going to do is, and we know this, because this is how human nature works. As soon as you pull all the healthy people out of the exchange, you're going to end up with all of the folks who have pre-existing conditions and have ailments, who need insurance to survive. They're going to end up being the ones left, and then you're going to see the implosion of the Affordable Care Act. We get this. Now, what's frustrating to me is there are no details in this executive order. Again, this is why legislation is so important. And you go, why was Obamacare 2,300 pages? Because this is difficult stuff. And even Trump himself, who knew this stuff could be so difficult? Who possibly could have figured this out other than any thoughtful person? So the executive order, like most things that Trump does, most is very generous. Like everything that Trump does is big picture. Let somebody else decide. Let somebody else deal with it. Someone else's headache. So what's going to happen is this executive order will have virtually no details. And what's going to happen is the Department of Labor, the Treasury Department, and the Department of Health and Human Services, who currently doesn't have a head, they're going to be the ones who are going to reinterpret how these health benefits are to be expanded, so to speak. So again, think about who you've got in charge of labor, of Treasury, and eventually who will be even worse than Tom Price at Health and Human Services. And it to me doesn't paint a really rosy, happy picture. It paints a picture of, and look, I don't even think the insurers want this. I don't even think the reputable insurance companies want this. I think it's the fly-by-nights. I think it's the people who are going, hey, we could scam off this pretty easily. Because look, as the insurers and policy experts are already saying, look, as I said, these cheap, basically unregulated plans are going to destroy the framework of what we have now. And yesterday, and this is one of those moments where you go, how do you get this moment? How does this optic happen? How does this scenario come about? Donald Trump is sitting with former Secretary of State, and many would argue war criminal, Henry Kissinger. Trump throws out, and you just kind of go, he goes, we're going to have to do something on Obamacare because it's failing. And he regurgitates that ad nauseum because that's what someone told him. And again, you go, well, point to where it is. And you go, oh, 1,000,000% increase. So he points to Kissinger. He says, Henry Kissinger doesn't want to pay 116% increase in his premiums. But that's what's happening, and it's actually getting worse. Now, on its face, without actually thinking or knowing anything, Henry Kissinger's 94 years old. Henry Kissinger is not buying his health care in the private market. He's getting his health insurance through Medicare. Just saying, right from the start, the most obvious. The second part of this is Henry Kissinger is a millionaire a number of times over. He doesn't even need Medicare. He could pay for his care out of his pocket without even worrying about insurance. So I don't know that he's really the poster child for making the argument that we need to destroy what infrastructure we currently have. And then there's the third part that took a little digging, and I know the president doesn't know this. Kissinger lives in New York. New York saw an increase last year in their premiums of 16.6%. That's like, the simple math is it's 100% less, but it's like what is it, 800% less than what Trump is saying. And I guess, facts don't really seem to matter so much when you look at the arguments that they're making to destroy this. And look, this is purely political. This isn't about getting you and me and our families good health coverage. If it were, there are so many things we could be doing, like single payer. If you remember during the campaign, Donald Trump said his plan is going to be tremendous. It's going to be great. It's going to be fabulous. Everyone is going to be covered. Premiums are going to be less. It's going to be fabulous. Yet, you look at what they've done. You look at every incarnation of Trump Care, everything that he's put his name on. And he loves putting his name on stuff. It's all been, 23 million uninsured more. 30 million more uninsured. What happened to it's going to be covering everyone. It's going to be tremendous. What happened to that? Now, this you could argue will give people the ability to go and buy something called insurance. I say something called insurance because I don't think it's actually going to cover anything. Again, we've seen this movie before. There was a reason that the Affordable Care Act put the essential benefits into place. There really was. Because a lot of people had, now understand, you go back pre-Affordable Care Act, there were 52 million people in this country uninsured. And those weren't poor people. Those were the working poor. Those were people who had jobs, people who went up and every day and worked their behinds off for employers that don't have coverage. Now, we talked about this yesterday. And again, another reason why I'm a firm, staunch believer in labor unions. 94% of union members have access to health insurance on the job, as opposed to 34% of non-union workers. And you go, right there is I would argue the number one reason why you go, I think we need to join unions. Now, you go, where'd you get those numbers? I got those numbers from the Trump Labor Department. That was the Trump Labor Department's numbers. So you look at this and you go, it's insane what we're doing, but we're going backwards because those micro plans, and the fast food joints used to offer this stuff. You would get these micro plans that covered virtually nothing, maybe a doctor appointment every year. But if you really got sick, what those plans did, and understand from a taxpayer position, what those plans are in place to do is to give you the sense that you have some insurance. And maybe if you get the cold once a year, you can go to a doctor and not get absolutely just murdered on the rates. But once you get real sick, then they end up dropping you and you end up on Medicaid. That's the plan. That's the goal in these crummy plans. That if you really got sick, you're going to lose your job anyway, and you're just going to end up on Medicaid. That's the plan. Now, this is one of those moments where, I point to my conservative friends who always say, well, the federal government, whenever they get involved in something, it causes these problems. One of the arguments is always about banking. The reason that the banks are as greedy and do as many risky things as they do is because, the FDIC insurance. They know that they can do all of these horrible things, and we're going to bail them out, which there's some truth to that. They want to take us back to a scenario where that actually happens again with healthcare, to where we're going to have the crummy micro plans that don't cover anything, and the second you need them, they're going to drop you, and you're going to end up on Medicaid anyway. And they're going to profit from that, and you're going to end up on Medicaid anyway. And we, the taxpayers, are going to end up footing the bill anyway. So why not, as a matter of smart policy, go, hey, here's an idea, just a thought, just kind of kicking it out there. How about we have a Medicaid, Medicare, whatever you want to call it, medical health care for all act, to where we're already in it. It would be very simple. Open it up. Tell me how much it costs. We can all buy into it. Simple. I go back to the ACA fight. To me, the public option was an absolute necessity, because had we pushed the public option, there'd be none of this infighting right now about rates going up and premiums going up, because you would have the public access that you would have your competition. It just seems sane and rational, which is why we're not going to do it. It's just not. Or until we get all of the money out of the electoral system, and that's never going to happen. So it's going to be interesting to see how this executive order, how this plays out, and how bad Mnuchin and Acosta and whomever takes over for Price, how bad of a policy they come up with. And again, where are the conservatives? Where are all of my screaming conservatives who are whining and complaining every time Obama put forth an executive order? Where are they at? Just a question. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
There's a flaw in the system, and the fly in the ointment's gonna bring the whole thing down. Floodgates are open, we've let the demons loose. The big guns have spoken, and we've fallen for the ruse.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1874. That was the day that Mary Heaton Vorse was born in New York City. Mary grew up in Amherst, Massachusetts, in a family with significant financial means. She traveled across Europe with her parents, where she received her education and learned to speak multiple languages fluently. She then worked as a book reviewer for the Criterion magazine. In 1912, Mary and the man who would be her husband witnessed what would be known as the Bread and Roses textile strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts. The experience was a great turning point in her life. She later wrote, "Both Joe O'Brien and I had come a long road to get to Lawrence." Together, we experienced the realization of the human cost of our industrial life. Something transforming happened to both of us. We knew now where we belonged, on the side of the workers and not with the comfortable people among whom we were born. Some synthesis had taken place between my life and that of the workers. Some peculiar change that would never again permit me to look with indifference on the fact that riches for the few were made by misery of the many. It was in Lawrence that we realized what we must do, that we could make one contribution, that of writing the workers' story as long as we lived. For more than 50 years after Lawrence, Mary traveled the United States, reporting and participating in strikes and the labor movement. She wrote about the 1919 steel strike and the lumber workers' strike in the Pacific Northwest. She wrote about the struggles of auto workers and textile workers and child labor. In 1962, the United Auto Workers honored Mary with their Social Justice Award. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
After saying that you were going to spill the beans about Heidi Cruz, you retweeted an unflattering picture of her next to a picture of your wife.
I thought it was a nice picture of Heidi. I thought it was fine.
Come on.
I thought it was fine. She's a pretty woman.
You're running for president of the United States.
Excuse me. I didn't start it.
Oh, but I
didn't start it.
But, sir, with all due respect, that's the argument of a 5-year-old.
I didn't start it. No, it's not the.
Yeah,
no, it's
the argument of a 5-year-old is he started
You
it.
would say that. That's the problem with our country.
Every parent knows a kid who says he started
Excuse me.
it.
No. That's the problem. Exactly that thinking is the problem this country has. I did not start this.
He started it. He started it.
Yeah, that guy. That guy's president. Think about that for a second. That guy right there. He started it. He started it. That guy. He's president. He's got his finger on the button. Think about that for a second. And what we see now, and this is one of those things that yesterday, we're kind of getting a picture of how the Tillerson moron comment came about. Starting to get in very clear view of what happened. Evidently, over the summer, there was a briefing that was going on about our nuclear arsenal, and a whole bunch of stuff. Talking about North Korea, it was like, in reading the NBC story, it was kind of like taking a toddler by the hand and explaining the last 50 years of foreign policy, with pictures, with cartoons, and with pop-up books, and kind of the way they laid it out. And evidently, there was a graph that showed that our nuclear arsenal has been decreasing as part of our agreements with the rest of the world. To which he, chimes in that he basically wanted to see the nuclear arsenal increase, like tenfold, which kind of shocked the highest ranking members of our national security team, because of all of because they understand what that means. They actually understand that if we were to do that, what it would mean around the world. I know Trump doesn't, but we would, again, kick off the next Cold War, and there's just all kinds of ugliness that comes from this. And what caught my attention is one of the advisors said, "Look, we didn't take his comment literally. We didn't think he really meant we were going to increase, tenfold. But what really was scary is just how uninformed and just how little he understands about, you go down the list, disarmament agreements, all of this stuff. And, I started thinking about, and this is where evidently the moron comment came from. And look, after reading this story, moron is the least of our concerns. Because look, he's about ready to pull us out of the Iran deal. That's probably going to happen. And we're on the brink of a war with North Korea. And, you look at this kind of stuff, and again, back to that clip. He started it. I don't know that this guy has the ability to walk back. You could make the argument, and I go back to Obama, and it was a dumb thing Obama did with the red line, and we're going to cross the line, we're going to be consequences. He, as my grandfather used to say, don't write a check you're behind can't cash. And Obama did that. And he walked back from it. Because, look, as the old man always told me, if you do this, you end up, you take the consequences. You end up doing something stupid, you take the beating. This guy isn't capable of walking back from that. He will walk us face first into a beating. Now, I'm not saying we would lose. I'm not saying we're going to lose the wars and all that. But I'm saying that everyone loses in wars, especially unnecessary ones. And you look at how little he seems to get. The fact that, this stuff is hard. This stuff is difficult. This stuff is, not something you can just wing. And I guess for so long he's been winging it, whatever, without really thinking that there are consequences. Now understand, the idea that we're going to increase our nuclear arsenal tenfold would put our nuclear arsenal around 40,000 nuclear weapons. We've got about 4,000 now. How many do you need? And how much is it going to cost? Again, if we don't have money to insure all of our citizens with health care, if we don't have money to educate all of our children, if we don't have money to rebuild our infrastructure, if we don't have money to do all, make sure that people retire with dignity, that children that don't go hungry, that that veterans aren't homeless. I mean, we could go down the list of 100 things that if we don't have the money for fill in the blank, we sure as hell don't have the money for this. And you go back to this, and maybe I have some respect now for Rex Tillerson. Maybe the guy is a moron. And my problem, my worry, my concern is that he sleepwalks us into something that he is unwilling to bring us back from. And all of the distractions aside, and look, the kneeling thing, major distraction. The golfing, major distraction. You go down the list of all of the nonsense. This is real, very deadly possibilities here. Honestly and truthfully, this is scary stuff. And, I'll be honest. I've been watching his tweets and listening to the rhetoric. There's only one way to deal with North Korea. And, is this the last, is this the calm before the storm? All of this messaging already tells me that he's already in his mind moved beyond the possibility, the realm of any sanity. And look, as someone who has children, especially going to be at, sometime in the near future, military age children, I got to be honest, I don't want them fighting a war for him. Stop and think about that for a bit. All the bluster, all of the bravado. You think Ivanka? You think Donnie Jr.? You think that twit Eric is going to step to the front? You think when Barron turns 18, they're going to throw him out there? That's not going to happen. You think anybody in Congress is going to be pushing their kids to the front lines? Scary, scary times. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
This is my neighborhood. In flames. Completely in flames.
Fast-moving, deadly wildfires sweep across Northern California wine country.
Harvey, Irma, and Maria could make 2017 one of the top years for weather disasters.
2017 on pace to shatter weather disaster record. 2017 also breaks a record for Atlantic hurricanes, and it ain't over yet. Plus,
the White House argues that the Obama-era regulations have been burdensome to the economy and American workers.
Trump's EPA moves to repeal Obama's landmark Clean Power Plan.
Great timing. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You know, regulatory power should not be used by any regulatory body to pick winners and losers.
Unless the winners are the fossil fuel industry, who get $20 billion in tax breaks and subsidies every year. Am I right, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I think many of us were breathing a sigh of relief after Hurricane Nate began to break up, only to see these horrific, devastating fires now out here in Northern California.
Yes, as we go to air, in Northern California's wine country, at least 10 people are now confirmed dead. 50 are missing in extremely fast-moving, heat and wind-driven wildfires that have forced the evacuations of more than 20,000 people, including 2 hospitals. California's fire chief announced Monday that at least 1,500 structures have been destroyed. He said that was a conservative estimate. The wine country fires are among 14 large wildfires now burning in California.
And they are just exploding across Northern California and some down here in Southern California, wiping out homes overnight. Just horrendous.
And as you mentioned, Hurricane Nate made landfall on the Mississippi coast over the weekend as a Category 1 after killing at least 28 people in Central America. 2017 is now the most active Atlantic hurricane season in the modern record. For the first time since the 1890s, the Atlantic Basin has generated 8 consecutive storms that developed into hurricanes. And hurricane season isn't over until November 30th. In Puerto Rico, Governor Ricardo Rosselló has asked Congress for additional financial assistance, warning that Hurricane Maria's catastrophic damage has crashed Puerto Rico's economy, deepening the humanitarian Trump administration is rolling back another major tool for fighting climate change, taking the first formal step to repeal President Obama's landmark Clean Power Plan. That's the first ever regulations to limit the carbon emissions from U.S. power plants that cause dangerous global warming. The Clean Power Plan is key to reducing the U.S. contribution to climate change and is crucial to the U.S. meeting its international pledge to reduce emissions under the UN Paris Climate Accord. And it also convinced China to join as well. But in remarks in Kentucky coal country on Monday, Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt claimed the EPA overstepped its authority.
You know, regulatory power should not be used by any regulatory body to pick winners and losers. The past administration was unapologetic. They were using every bit of power, every bit of authority to use the EPA to pick winners and losers in how we generate electricity in this country.
Pruitt's claim is wildly contradictory. It comes on the heels of a proposal by the Department of Energy to intervene in electricity markets with new subsidies to prop up the ailing coal and nuclear industries, which have proven unable to compete against cheaper wind, solar, and natural gas. And most states are already on track to meet the plan's emissions targets at a lower cost than previously projected. The fossil fuel industry praised Pruitt's move. States and environmental groups have vowed to use every tool to challenge the repeal in court. Now, the repeal is only the first step in a long process that could drag on for years. Crucial time lost in the fight against climate change.
Crucial time lost, but apparently no hypocrisy lost. Not by this administration. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Politico had an article that grabbed my attention about billionaire Betsy DeVos. Evidently, the billionaire Betsy, she loves her some online charter schooling. Only problem is, and I look where I live here in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was one of the first states to go to these cyber charters. And of the 16 cyber charters, there has only been one that has made AYP, average yearly progress, in the last, I think it's like 20 years. And again, you've got, thousands of kids. In fact, I think the number that they put was like 30,000 kids across the state, which isn't a huge number. Pennsylvania is a state of about 13 million people. So 30,000 kids isn't, a huge number. But they're the ones who, for one reason or another, and you can surmise whatever they are. Mostly the homeschool crowd, mostly and I find, and I'm speaking in really broad generalizations here, because of the people that I know who do it. It's mostly for religious reasons. They're the only book we need is the Bible. So you would think that they would do really well because. Look, some of the homeschooled kids do, fairly well. The cyber charters, not so much, though. Of the 30,000 kids that log in, maybe, the state has about a 48% graduation rate, which means, just over, 14,000 of the 30,000 kids actually graduate, which means 16,000, some do not. And, which is much higher than the brick and mortar public schools, much higher dropout rates. And you can go, it's for a bunch of reasons. But at the end of it, we still believe in choice. No, look, it's not about choice. I hear people say, well, some parents prefer that. Parents like that. It's their choice. Not necessarily. Look, at the end of the day, while I am a parent and I want parental control, if you're insane, I don't know. Look, your kids get one shot at an education. And what was interesting, I drove a truck for years. I worked in the freight industry for more than 20 years. And most of the people they're good, honest, decent, hardworking people. But, not rocket scientists. Look, not somebody that I want in charge of my kids' education or really, in charge of their own. People who use triple negatives. And I remember one guy who, was really not the brightest bulb in the box. But he homeschooled his 8 kids. I mean, the whole brood of them. And, it was remarkable in listening to the rationale and how, what they were working on and making, pilgrimages to Kentucky to the Noah's Ark where you saw the dinosaurs on the Ark. It was really very twisted. And at the time I was thinking, is this the kind of education system? Are these the kind of citizens that we want to have who are obviously going to have to be carried? Because understand, those kids aren't going to have the path to the middle class that their parents had. Those truck driving jobs and I was just telling my daughter this last night when we were coming back from the gym. I said, look, 30 years ago I made more money than I make now because Those jobs were heavily unionized. They were good family-sustaining wage jobs with health care and pensions and all benefits and, and paid holidays and vacation and, all that stuff. That's gone. And in the next 5 to 10 years, most of those truck driving jobs are going to be gone. So education now, first, one shot, important. So when I see something like, more than half of the kids fail and don't graduate from these cyber charter schools, to me, it's almost a crime. And when you look at this stuff, and look, I know, people love virtual cyber, people love them. Yeah, people love it to eat cake every day too. It doesn't mean that it's not a bad choice. Just scary, bizarre stuff. And again, another failure of our legislature. And really, it's not even one of those, we're doing it because parents want choice. We're doing it because it's profitable. The Betsy DeVosses of the world who invested heavily in this stuff. It's about, one, profiting them, and two, having control. Just nuts. Anyway, since the shooting in Las Vegas, the website The Trace, they put out an interesting article that caught my attention. Evidently, in the 7 days that followed the massacre in Las Vegas, at least 809 people were shot in the 7 days afterwards. 247 of them fatally. And it's a wide range of stuff. Domestic violence incidents, drive-by shootings. Oops, I shot myself. According to the National Gun Violence Tally, at least 22 victims were wounded or killed in multiple casualty incidents. For instance, there was a shooting at a vigil for someone who was shot. So 4 people got shot while mourning someone else get shot. That's always fun. A woman and her 3 friends were murdered by her estranged husband, who then evidently took his life. So there's that. 28 other people killed in domestic violence shootings. But it's not the guns. 25 people were shot and accidentally, 13 of them fatally, including a 5-year-old who just found the gun. He was playing with it. He ends up a 14-year-old who fatally shot a friend, a 2-year-old who was killed from bullets fired from the father's gun while he was trying to figure out how to unload it. That's always fun. And an 18-year-old who evidently dropped his semi-automatic pistol when he bent over to put down his bowl of cereal. But the guns are not the problem. I know, it's people. People don't kill people. People do. But the thing is, we don't hear about this. 809 people. I mean, I was literally shocked when I read that number. And they weren't all in Chicago. And yet we're not talking about any of that stuff. You have to get and this is one of those bizarre moments where, and I know we have a right to a gun and all that stuff, but in order to get a driver's license, you have to go through a whole testing process. Don't you think it would be somewhat smart? And this is where the NRA used to do this stuff before they became crazy. Wouldn't it be smart to have, before you buy a gun, that you take a training, that you actually know how to unload it, that you actually understand what it's capable of, instead of, oh, oops, I was setting down the bowl of cereal and now I'm dead. Just a thought. Just a thought. We'll take a quick break. Right back with Talk Media News. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith. And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day acclaimed photojournalist Dorothea Lange died. She is celebrated for her work documenting the Great Depression for the Farm Security Bureau. Lange's photos captured images of migrant workers, sharecroppers, and the rural poor. Her iconic photo, Migrant Mother, is probably her most well-known image. It depicts a despondent Dust Bowl mother surrounded by her hungry children. Lange was born in Hoboken, New Jersey in 1895. She suffered the effects of polio as a child, which left her with a permanent limp. She studied photography at Columbia University in New York and eventually settled in the Bay Area. When the Great Depression hit, she began photographing labor strikes, bread lines in soup kitchens, the homeless, and unemployed. The Resettlement Administration hired her soon after. Nowadays, we can access images from around the world at a moment's notice that broaden our understanding of current events. But until the 1930s, few Americans could access media that adequately depicted the desperate social conditions engulfing the nation. Federal programs that funded projects like Lange's brought Depression-era images into the public eye. Americans soon realized their suffering wasn't caused by personal failure, that millions across the country were experiencing destitution brought on by broader economic forces. During World War II, Lange worked for the War Relocation Authority, where she documented forced evacuation and internment of Japanese Americans. Her images, especially of Manzanar, were withheld from the public until after the war and were accessible to the public through the National Archives. After the war, she taught at San Francisco's Art Institute and co-founded the magazine Aperture. She has been heralded as an innovator and has influenced generations of documentary photography. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. So, Washington Post yesterday reported that their fact checker had, and I think this is low, but according to their fact checker, President Trump has made 1,318 false or misleading claims over the last 2